Kathy Pinderhughes. Actually, my name, I give the name is Charles Alfred Pinderhughes Jr. So, therefore, from two, I was named Kathy, and I've always used that handle during my time in the movement. And only really started using it much later in life, using Charles, even while my father was still alive. So first, a correction in terms of the Panthers. And by the way, I am meticulous about what I try to talk about. To me, distortion of facts is a real disservice to the battle for social change. And it's not intentional, I know, but because this has happened many times in many ways. But in the Panthers, I was recruited into the Boston chapter and working on information, then transferred into New Haven this was in 69. When I arrived, I found out that I was not only promoted from a community worker to full Panther, but I was lieutenant of information of the New Haven chapter. That was the second wave, because the first wave had been all busted and on trial for their lives, and they put me in to work on the propaganda on that. And I did a pretty good job of it. I created a newsletter called the People's News Service that was able to be distributed free, because at that time there would have been about 4 months of constant repetition of negative publicity in New Haven, and the people in the projects wouldn't even open their doors and talk to Panthers. So we had to have something you could slip under the door and say could read. And so I created this, and it was so popular that it was not only widely learned about there, but it was circulated around the country, and I've met many Panthers who were in at the same time in other chapters, but never met me who recognized my work. So I'm proud of that. But I should talk about my entry, because it's Dick Gregory's fault I got involved. Now, so most of you who don't know who Dick Gregory is, you want to go to YouTube and find out. Okay? He was an outstanding black comedian who sacrificed his career to become a civil rights activist in his own right. He was one of the biggest black comedian. Well, he was the biggest black comedian of his day at the time when he committed to the civil rights movement. Why is it his fault? Well, because my parents threw a fundraiser for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in our home in Roxbury, Massachusetts. And Dick Gregory came and spoke. And when they left, they left some posters behind. So I called myself taking those posters back to the office, and I kept on going back. I worked with SNCC, with Northern Student Movement in Boston up until I graduated high school. Before I graduated high school, in the spring of '65, SNCC organized a sit-in at the Federal Building. They had sit-in. What you don't know about the reaction to Bloody Sunday was that SNCC had organized sit-ins in federal buildings around the country. So we were up on the 11th floor of the then federal building outside the Attorney General's office for about 3 days. And they try to figure out what they're going to do. Finally, they said, we're going to arrest everybody. And so we said, okay, we'll go live. Of course, what they did was they put us up, dragged us on the took out and put us out the back door, and that was it. Because this was happening all over the country. They did not want to have to deal with that. They were well aware by this time. This was in the spring of '65. They were well aware that if we decided to fill the jails, that they would have more problems than they wanted to deal with. So I should tell you something about my senior year in high school too, because for those people who've seen my signature, it has a quote from Jackie Robinson. People don't know this. Jackie Robinson said, "I can't stand for the national anthem. I can't salute the flag. I'm a black man in a white world." So why that resonates with me, because the whole senior year, I become very, very captured by the ideas of the movement. So I considered myself a pacifist at that time. I was personalizing the concept of the struggle, the tactic of nonviolence, and making it into, I should be a philosophy. And I did not salute the flag the whole year. I stood up, folded my hands, tried to politely ignore, anything happening in the classroom. It wasn't really much, but outside the classroom, in the street, first few days, I was stoned and called nigger and communist. But I think, as I think back, that stopped. And nobody ever told me why. But I think that, some of the people in the administration said, "We don't want the school on TV. You don't send him to the hospital." At any rate, when I graduated high school, I went to Arkansas to work in this Arkansas summer project. Now, en route to Arkansas, I had to go to an orientation that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee provided. And I think this is a really important story. I feel I tell my students this whenever I get the chance. SNCC provided a very strong, conscious, intensely conscious radicalization experience for us. The particular part that still resonates in my mind is that we had a vigil scheduled outside the Justice Department on eve of the first anniversary of the disappearance of Cheney Goodman and Schwerner. The next morning, we were scheduled to go in to meet with John Doerr, the Assistant Attorney General in charge of civil rights. But before that, we looked at the newspaper, and we could see the Washington Post wasn't in our corner at all. They published a large picture in the back of the paper, I believe it was, about the protest, but it consisted of a picture of a Hell's Angel-looking guy who was part of the protest, who had joined the protest, and that was it. And at that time, this was before afros. This is '65, so we were all getting those 2-week haircuts, So we go in, and I think Doerr was he was pretty closely connected with the movement. When at the 50th anniversary of SNCC, he was welcomed as a friend of the movement. But anyway, and that's why I think he set this up. But anyway, so SNCC had primed us to ask a question, a range of questions actually, but the question I remember was, why won't the Justice Department authorize FBI agents to make on-the-spot arrests in the presence of the commission of a felony, as is authorized by the U.S. Criminal Code? While we're there, Katzenbach, the Attorney General of the United States, walks in. That's what I think John Doerr said. But I don't know, because I didn't talk to John Doerr. And so we put the question to him. As he looks at this bunch of people, there's a few veteran organizers, most of them are college kids, and a few kids just out of high school like me. who were going down to risk their lives, and he says, well, in civil rights cases, it's our policy to take notes and submit them to the local jury. This is after Selma. This is before the Voting Rights Act is passed. And so that kicked off a couple of questions for me. And made me start questioning my pacifism because, of course, this government wasn't even remotely acting friendly. And it began my exploration of power structure research. And I don't have time to talk about the other power structure research that I get into, like finding out that Richard Nixon's best friend was about to buy the black radio station in Boston. But that's, you can ask me about that if you want. But, because that's what got me into the Black Panther Party. But I just want to point that out. How much time?
You have 3 more minutes.
3 more. Ooh, okay. Glad I asked. So much I would have liked to say, but what I think I'll concentrate on the issues that we have to look at now. Most of my life, I turned out to be a community organizer. So I developed an understanding of Marxism from an independent perspective. And for me, I don't talk about the government to my students. I teach at Essex County College now. I talk about the empire, because that's really what we're living in, the empire. And the decisions that get made are being made in terms of empire. Malcolm X said, well, there's no difference between the Congo and Mississippi. Okay. And I agree with him that you can look many places. As a matter of fact, that I've actually extended that by making my special field of sociological study the reassessment of internal colonies in the United States today. But again, that's another subject. In terms of yes, there's Black Lives Matter and the movement for Black lives. There's voter suppression and democratic issues. But there are also other issues that are harder to talk about and harder to confront. There's the question of Palestine. Is one of them. Okay? And when I say the question of Palestine, I'm including the fact that it's proven extremely hard to talk about. And that's in the light. I mean, with the boycott and divestment campaign is ongoing to attempt to get Israel to change some of its policies. But the problem, well, I think that the kerfluffle that's occurred around Congresswoman Omar is a good example. You're not allowed to say anything if you're a Muslim about Israel. Just like Obama was not really allowed to say much about race. Okay, so these are questions that need to be explored and dealt with, because if you're going to solve the problems that the empire brings to us and ask us to fight for in their name, we're going to have to look at things in a much different and broader fashion.